Hello there, Alaskans, wherever you are. Welcome to the Must Read Alaska Show. Coming to you from somewhere in Alaska. This is the place where we talk about, you guessed it, Alaska. Where we keep the mainstream media on their toes and where we are standing up for what's right in a world run by leftists. You can find out more by heading over to mustreadalaska.com and also checking out the Must Read Alaska YouTube channel for some really great content. But first, let's get this party started.
Well, welcome everybody to the Must Read Alaska show. I'm your host, and we also have your host, Suzanne Downing, here with us. And we are very excited for you to be joining us today from somewhere in Alaska. We want to thank our show sponsor, Charlie Pierce. Charlie Pierce for Governor has made it possible that we can get on all of the nooks and crannies of Alaska with conservative news. So we love our sponsor, Charlie Pierce for Governor, for being able to do that. And boy, do we have a show for you today. It's just Suzanne and I, but man, I tell you what, it's been quite a bit of a circus in the legislature in the last week or so. We've had barricaded doors. We've had people doing the call to vote. We've had just a ridiculous things happen in the Capitol Juneau over the last couple of weeks. And so we're here to talk about kind of the hot topics of the news today. The first one we want to talk about is your permanent dividend fund. And man, we almost had a $5,500 check cut to every single man, woman, and child out there. The Senate passed a $5,500 check. Some of that was a permanent fund. Some of that was a energy check. And that got swung back to the House. Now, I was optimistic, but if you know, most people that I talked to knew that the House was probably going to screw this thing up. And so that's what happened. You know, for folks that don't quite understand this, me being one of them, it got swung back to the House. And, you know, you had a mix of the permanent fund, you had a mix of the energy check. You also had a mix of people being promised pet projects if they kept this thing in, you know, $100 million projects here, $10 million projects there. And so you had all these things that basically encompassed like a ridiculously huge budget. And, you know, if you pull that project, I'm going to vote against the permanent fund. And if you vote against the permanent fund, I'm not going to vote for your project. And so you had all these horse trades going on. And ultimately, the people were still left with the biggest permanent fund check, I believe, in the history of the check when you factor in inflation or whatever it's called, and a small little energy check. So, you know, we didn't make out horribly like we've done in the last couple of years since Walker has decided to break the law, essentially. But we also didn't make out as best as we could have. So we kind of landed somewhere in the middle there. What do you think about it, Suzanne?
Well, originally, like you pointed out, the Senate proposed was a $5,500 check, and basically there was going to be a part of that was an energy check, just because in recognition that Alaskans are paying some of the highest energy prices in the nation, not quite as high as California, just a little bit under Washington State, only because they have such a high gas tax there that brings them up, and our gas tax is relatively small. But in the villages right now, they're paying over $16 a gallon for fuel. And that is an absolutely punishing thing for them. I mean, it's going to destroy our villages. And even an energy check the size that they had there, which is about a $1,200 energy check to begin with, would not have made up for what's going to happen this winter. Of course, right now, the ice is melted on the rivers. The fuel barges can come up. The new fuel is going to be extremely expensive. Like I said, $16 a gallon, maybe $17 soon. And then by October, of course, those rivers start freezing up and the last barges have to get out of the rivers and get out of those communities. And so they'll be stuck with whatever that price is for the winter. That's the entire winter. And so even if our price goes down, it won't go down in the villages. It'll be whatever it was when the last fuel barge arrived. And in Fairbanks, we know that what's coming this winter will be people paying $2,000 or $3,000 a month to heat their homes. And if they let their homes freeze, and please drain the water out of them, out of the pipes, because those pipes are going to freeze and burst. I mean, these are really serious concerns. We're just going into summer and everything's fine. We don't need heat. We can just live without it, but it's coming at us. And so this check is actually a recognition that we're facing some really tough times in Alaska for our pocketbooks. Not only that, but the 11% inflation on everything else is really hitting us. I don't know if you've checked lately, but I know I go to the store and I'm starting to make choices about what I'm going to buy. I don't buy everything. I used to just go in and it's like, whatever it is, that's one thing I don't skimp on. I eat what I want to eat. But now I'm careful. And I think other people are too. And especially if you're a parent of a newborn and you have a child who's got special needs and you can't feed that child breast milk, that you know already that when you go into the store, the infant formula is under lock and key now because it's so hard to get. So yeah, this was an important check, but what happened is that I think the Senate always knew it wouldn't be 5,500, but they started high because they knew it was going to get whittled down. Once again, the legislature has not followed the statutory formula, which is you simply make the appropriation, and then sometime in August, the governor and the Department of Revenue and they decide what is the amount that we actually have. And that amount is usually not determined until August, and it's determined by the governor's office. And they come up, the numbers like approximately the legislature appropriates like $1,500 because they know it's going to be in that range. And then the governor and his office, they kind of pick what that range is. They've totally taken this away from the governor's office ever since 2017. Now, 2016, Governor Bill Walker stole half of everyone's permanent fund dividend. As we look back, we know that was the watershed moment. And before that, we could accept if we had a $500 dividend because it's based on the 5-year average of how the permanent fund did. That's what it was. We all knew that. But once he took half the permanent fund dividend, kept it in the earning reserve account, saying we need it for government, and then didn't spend it for government, just left it in there. It became very clear that government was just going to be greedy. And they were going to just say, we'll give you what we want to give you, and then we'll make it political. And ever since then, political calculation, just like this year, an election year for every single legislator who's in the House and Senate, except for Donnie Olson, and except for a couple others who aren't running, like Natasha von Imhoff's not running, Adam Wool's not running, Jonathan Christ-Tompkins not running. So, for those people, it doesn't really matter. But for everybody else who's running for a re-election, they're going to give you the biggest one that they think they can get away with. And that's what it is now, just whatever we think we can get away with. So next year, it'll probably be quite a bit smaller because it won't be an election year. It's going to be like that. Until we kind of go along with what Governor Dunleavy says, which is if we don't actually let the people vote, put it in the Constitution, get this away from being a political calculation, John, because it is the only conversation that they ever have down there. It feels like it's taken over our whole state year after year. All we fight about now is this. Thank you, Chairman China Bill Walker.
Yeah. The same people that want to give us a small permanent fund and say that it's too complicated for us to understand. And, there's things that happen in Juneau that we just couldn't quite wrap our brains around. Those are the same people that don't want us to have a constitutional convention. Now, whether you're for a constitutional convention or not, it's things like this that will make people want to vote for it. And I think it's going to be, if we have a constitutional convention, it's going to be a crap show. I would say a different word, but we're on a family-friendly podcast.
Family-friendly, right. Mm-hmm.
So I say crap show. But it's going to be a mess because the other side has 17 more times more lawyers than us, and they've already gamed this thing out. But nevertheless, if you push conservatives long enough, they're going to vote for a constitutional convention, whether they think they're prepared for it or not. They don't mind it. They don't mind it being messy. And so, you're only going to be able to get away with this for so long before people are just sick and tired of it. I think eventually, next couple election cycles, if this keeps happening, you're going to have droves of people showing up to Juneau, organized, ready to peacefully protest, and ready to get their voice heard. And they're sick and tired of. I hear it all the time from friends who aren't even involved in politics, that they're sick and tired of these elected officials saying one thing and doing another, saying they're for full permanent funding. They've signed all the things that they did during the election cycle. And then as soon as the vote comes, they vote against it as quick as they can. And their rationale is, well, you just don't understand what's happening.
That's what they always say. It's like, okay, now that I'm down here, you don't understand why I have to do this. And they always fall back on that and say, oh, well, you just don't understand. Yeah, we understand. We understand really well.
Yeah, we understand really well. And really the possible thing we don't understand is that I didn't fully understand it till a number of years ago, is these special interest groups, center, left groups, are down there in droves.
Mm-hmm.
The special interest groups to the right, they're not. They're working and they've got jobs. Not that the left doesn't have jobs, but the left is way more organized in being in Juneau and pounding on every single door until they get what they want. And so, we see one of these things play out, these left-leaning kind of strategies play out in all of the nooks and crannies of everything political, including judges. Recently, we saw that we had a redistricting board. Every 10 years, we do a redistricting based off of population and probably 10 other different things that we won't go into, but essentially they redistrict Alaska every 10 years. And there's an official board that works on this for a long time, and they argue and debate and they come up with maps and they get public input. And essentially a liberal judge in the Superior Court ruled, a week or so ago, that one of the maps was too unfair and they were going to have to go with literally the map that the Democrat Party presented instead of the map that a nonpartisan board came up with through public testimony, public input, hours and hours and hours and hours of research. This judge said, I think I know better because I read CNN, and I'm going to make it so that the map that the Democratic Party submitted be the one, not the one that the nonpartisan group submitted. And so it's just ridiculous. We can't win. We can't win at any corner.
Well, so earlier this week, the judge, Thomas Matthews, he basically denied the redistricting board their map, which they had created as a response to the previous court ruling. It was a Supreme Court ruling saying, your map for the political boundaries from Eagle River to Girdwood, they don't work for us. You're going to have to go back to the drawing table. And the rationale was not very good. The rationale was you didn't listen to enough public testimony. Oh, heck, they listened to a lot of public testimony. But as you point out, the Democrats were much more organized. They were doing all the public testimony, and the map didn't reflect that. So basically, it's sort of mob rule. They said, you need to reflect the map that the mob said that they wanted. So the Democrats and all of the nonprofits in Anchorage that are part of this whole Democratic, outer machine, they do show up and the Republicans do not. And so the Republican Party doesn't show up. They don't have a well-organized machine over there. They've slacked off a lot. They don't seem to be paying attention to this. Republican Party has been very negligent in its responsibility to holding firm for its own values. But in any case, so on earlier this week on Tuesday, Judge Thomas Matthews said, you're going to have to use the Democrat map for this coming election because I don't like the map you've picked, and the map that combined Eagle River with Girdwood into that hillside district for Senate pairings. Well, so that's going to get challenged to the Supreme Court. So it is being challenged. And the redistricting board has a lawyer, Matt Singer, who's filed a really interesting brief with the Supreme Court. And basically, he takes apart Judge Matthews. He just says this has always been for him a heads I win, tails you lose scenario. Judge Matthews cannot allow the redistricting board to come up with any map except for the Democrat map. That's the only one that he will accept. And here's what he says. In this order invalidating the Senate District E, Judge Matthews ignores this court's established equal protection analysis, balkanizes the neighborhoods of the municipality of Anchorage, contrary to the court's precedents, and criticizes the majority of the board for having political affiliations and leanings. Yeah, and that's what he did. It's like, in spite of what you said about this being nonpartisan, I'm going to argue with that. the redistricting process everywhere in the country that goes on after the census takes place, the redistricting takes place. It is a political process. And what you try to do is you try to tap down some of the politics on it and come up with reasonable boundaries that reflect the voters and the groups of voters so that people are not marginalized. But in the Democrats' map, what they've done is they've taken all the military vote in Anchorage and they've lumped it into sort of that Government Hill downtown area. Well, that's a minor part of the downtown vote. That means the military vote in Anchorage will never be heard because they will always be overshadowed by the downtown vote. Now, that military vote has been paired with Eagle River for a long time. Eagle River is a very military focused neighborhood. And we all know that. In fact, it was Eagle River, one of the high schools out there, just was named a Purple Heart High School. I mean, it is a military community. And yet the Democrats want to take away those votes from that, weaken the Eagle River area, and put those voters downtown where everybody's woke and everybody's voting for, just the worst policies possible from our perspective. So basically, Judge Matthews is going along with that. And he's essentially just anything that the board comes up with, he criticizes their motives, he criticizes their politics. And here's what Matt Singer says. There's no precedent in Alaska redistricting case law akin to the attacks that have been leveled against board members and in some cases their spouses. And that is true. During this process, they have attacked people like Bud Simpson, who is the Republican appointed by Governor Dunleavy. And they've attacked Bud Simpson's wife, Paulette Simpson, repeatedly because she's very involved in Republican politics. Bud is not involved in Republican politics. He is a lawyer in Juneau who just happens to have lots of clients. Primarily, he represents a Native corporation. He is a lawyer. His wife, Paulette, is very involved in Republican politics. And so they criticized Bud and said that he's a political animal just because of his wife. Well, that's for one thing. That's just sexist. I just don't go along with that. But the kinds of things that they have said all along to criticize the redistricting board have been ludicrous, John. And so this is going to be heard in the Supreme Court, and they're going to have to come up with a decision soon because this judge, there's like 10 days left for people to file for office, and June 1 is the deadline. And with 10 days left, this judge has said, you have to use the Democrats' map. And that's just ludicrous. So we'll see what the Supreme Court says. Hopefully they'll make the right decision, and hopefully they'll do it fast because we're running out of time.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. And, I think if I was on that redistricting board, I would think like, well, why the heck did I just work my tail off?
Why did I do this?
I don't think they get paid. I think it's a volunteer thing.
Totally volunteer. Why bother doing it? If the judge is going to make the decision about the map, why do we even have a board?
Yeah. And these board members, God bless them, because they get it from both sides. If you're on there and you're conservative, you're getting it times 10 from the left. If you're on there and you're the left, you're going to get emails and all those things from the right. And they are on the board serving and they take a lot of flack regardless of where they stand, put a lot of work into it, listen to, people scream and yell at them. And then they get done and they decide and they vote and they put maps forward and a judge just changes it. So I think it's that is the stupidest process I've ever seen because it just, null and voids all the work that they just did.
Yeah, stupidest process. When you have judges jumping in there and saying, you're going to use this map for this election, that's just absolutely playing for one team. And I hope our Supreme Court is smarter than that, because I tell you, Judge Matthews certainly stepped right into it. And I will be writing about that today on Must Read Alaska, a little bit about the briefing that the board's attorney, Matt Singer, wrote and what he said. And I think I'll write about that today. So check it out on Must Read Alaska. I'll be letting you know what the redistricting board says about this particular judge.
Nice. Well, I forgot to do the announcement at the front. We're kind of midway through, so I want to do it while I remember.
You got a winner. You've got a winner.
We have a winner. So last week we had literally probably, and I'm not saying this is without any exaggeration, this is just truth, the biggest Instagram star in Alaska, Danica. She runs Girl in Alaska Instagram. She has a business that basically helps people book their dream Alaska trip, and she has a hilarious Instagram. She came on the Must Read Alaska show, and we offered up to give away a consulting session. So you get an hour with her so she can help you plan either yours or your families or your friends' dream itinerary when they come to Alaska. We all have those friends and family that, I'm coming to Alaska, what should I do? And you're thinking, oh crap, I don't really know. You kind of, your brain just kind of goes blank usually. And so her one of her superpowers is helping plan that dream trip. So to enter to win, all you had to do was watch our Facebook Live or watch our numerous other, kind of posts we did about the episode, and you could like, share, or comment on it. And this thing must have took off internationally, because we had just a ridiculous amount of folks that were outside of the US that commented.
Everybody wants to come to Alaska. I mean, if you live in Alaska, you don't need a trip planner, right?
Yeah, we had we had probably around 2,000 entries. So that's a lot of entries. And the winner of that is none other than Alaska's own Jared Dunbar.
Oh my gosh, I know Jared.
So it's pretty exciting.
Jared's a great guy. That's a great thing. Jared, if you're watching this, congratulations. I hope that you have someone in your family that can use these services of a trip planner. That's great. And Danica is a really interesting person. She's got a great presence on Instagram, and I started following her, and she's very entertaining, very amusing, and she knows a lot about Alaska. And she travels around. This is what she does, and she checks everything out. And I think this is kind of what like travel agents used to do. Remember back in the day? No, you probably don't. You're too young for that. No, but back in the day, we had travel agents, and so she's sort of doing this now.
Yeah, it's kind of like sometimes some things kind of always come back, like styles from the 80s, styles from the 90s. They always come back. Well, now it's cool again to pick up the phone and call somebody to ask them, what am I supposed to do when I get there? That's like the cool new thing. So anyways, Jared, I'm going to introduce you to Danica over text or something. We'll figure out how to connect you both. And you won a free hour-long consulting. You can use it. Family or friends can use it to help plan your Alaska trip. She also just helps people that live in Alaska help, experience Alaska outside of Anchorage or Palmer or wherever they live. So you don't have to not be from Alaska to use her service. So congratulations, Jared Dunbar.
Yeah, congratulations, Jared. Very good. Well, and I'll be calling him to let him know that I want to be in on that and know how that trip planning goes. So what else do we have today?
So a couple of things I wanted to touch on before we head off here is Alaska's, and I'm sure, Suzanne, you could chat about this for a while, and so could I, Alaska's continued sense of being fiscally unresponsible. And two things I wanted to talk about, just two little stats, because I know our folks like stats, is we printed an article by Jody Taylor, I don't know, last week, where she talked about private school and state reimbursements. Well, in that article, she put a stat in there that's kind of the latest stat on how much does it cost per student for our public schools. And that stat is just crazy. That stat is $20,503 per student for the 2019-2020 year. That's the latest stat that they have. And that's just a lot of money. And for folks that do the kind of homeschool options in your school districts, that if your kid goes to that public homeschool option, you're only getting like, I don't know, we did it one year and we got maybe 4,000. We got like $4,000. I think that was it, which I feel grateful. $4,000 I didn't have the day before, but it's costing.
But you're not getting $20,000 in your pocket so that you can provide your homeschool kids with a very enriched education and travel the world and that or anything like that. No, it's a fraction of what the public school kids get, for sure.
Yeah, so $20,000 is just a lot of money. I think, people can drill down into the article, and there's links in there that we provide. But I believe last time I really drilled down into it, which was a couple years ago, we had one of the highest per student cost allocations in the whole nation. Alaska did.
Yeah, and there's a reason for that. I mean, so part of it is we have we're heavily unionized, very strong union for teachers, and very effective lobbying for teachers up here. But also you get into the smaller community. We do things we pay for things that in other parts of the nation, locals pay for, the state pays for here. But like transportation would be state paid for here. And also, we have communities where there's 10 kids. And so the cost of educating 10 kids is normally going to be a lot higher than the cost of educating a school full of kids, where you have administration. And also the thing in Southeast Alaska, where we have, 15 school districts or something in Southeast Alaska, we should have 2. We should have one for Juneau and one for everybody else. But we have a ridiculous number of school districts, and each one has their own administration, superintendent, and principal, all that stuff. And we are really messed up in terms of our education, because we're administration heavy in these places, and the money's not getting back down into the classroom. So there's reasons for it, and some of them have to do with how we developed as a state and how we had to attract teachers up here. And we didn't always attract the best teachers to Alaska. In years past, at the beginning of statehood, we kind of got some of the leftover teachers, the ones who were washouts down south. We didn't get the best ones. I'm not so sure that we're still getting the best ones. We're growing our own workforce of teachers here. But our cost of education is so far out of line, for considering we have the lowest scores in the nation.
Yeah, I'm blessed on the Kenai. We have a great superintendent now. We have a pretty good school board, and I can only speak to the teachers that are in my kids' school. They're awesome teachers, but it's not like that all over the state. And one of the things I think that is a detriment to the system, the teachers, the administration, ultimately the kids, is a couple of factors where the unions are always complaining that teacher retention. It's hard to attract teachers. It's hard to keep teachers. And I would agree with that. But I also would agree the state has some really idiotic policies that are not helping the case, meaning that, in other states in the lower 48, if I was a teacher in Texas and I was certified and I wanted to go teach in Missouri, I could go teach. The certificate transfers. In Alaska, 0 certificates transfer from the lower 48 to Alaska. None. A big goose egg. And so what you have is you can't recruit teachers that are already teachers, because they have to go through Alaska's ridiculous process to become then certified through Alaska. Even if they were certified in 4 other states in the lower 48, you can't be certified in Alaska, which is just the most moronic thing I've ever heard in my life. And then on top of that, you have places and communities where maybe there's just not a whole lot of people with 4-year degrees, which is not a bad thing, but you have substitute teachers in these schools with 4-year degrees that basically, in order to become a teacher, they would have to go back to school for another 4 years. That's the path forward. And I know it because I asked the state, I was curious 3 years ago what the path forward was. And the path forward is, we don't care that you already have a 4-year degree. You have to go get another degree to become a teacher here. And that's just, you can only cast so wide of a net if your net is this big to begin with. And I think those are 2 big deterrents. Other states in the lower 48 have gotten rid of those 2 things. They've allowed people with 4-year degrees an easy path to become a teacher, and other teachers that were certified in other states to become certified in their own state. And it pretty much fixed the problem over a course of a couple of years, but the unions would probably hate that to happen. So they wouldn't have an argument anymore of teacher retention.
Well, back in the day, I'm not going to say when, but when I graduated from high school in Alaska, if people can do the research and find out when that was, but we had like the second highest scores in the nation. So something has happened in Alaska in the past, let me just say, get my 50th high school reunion this year. So there you go. Something has happened so that we went from the second to the top to all the way to the bottom. Now we're at the bottom in terms of scores. What happened in 50 years that you go from the top to the bottom? Well, there's just no accountability. There is no accountability. And I think that this new reading bill that passed, that the governor wanted to see passed, and he crafted an agreement with Tom Begich in the Senate to, and some of the senators like it. A lot of the Democrats don't like it. It brings more money into schools, but it also creates a path for accountability so that they actually have to perform, because our kids aren't reading. They leave third grade and they're not reading. And so if we don't get them reading by third grade, they probably won't be reading. If you look at our scores, it reflects that they're not reading by third grade. They're not reading by fifth grade. And they just keep passing them on through without doing the intervention needed to like help that child learn how to read when the child's brain is most elastic, most ready to read. So hopefully we will start turning the corner. But let me tell you, it's going to be a big corner to turn. I don't see it changing in the next 5 years. I would be shocked if it did.
Yeah, I would agree. And the last stat I'll end with is Christmas has come early for some folks. I don't know if you heard about this. 15% raises for a certain department in the entire, for the state of Alaska. Well, I'll first talk a little bit about how the fact that folks that own small businesses during COVID have experienced probably the most craziest time to own a business in their entire lives.
You should know.
I should know. We sell a two by four at our hardware store in Nikiski for something like $11, you know, and that's just the going rate. We used to sell it for $5. And it's been an impossible task for folks to stay open during COVID. They've had to cut staff, they've had to increase prices, they've had to change their hours. They're making a lot less money. They've had to take the payroll relief loans from the government. I mean, they're literally trying to stay afloat with anything possible. Tons of them didn't make it through COVID in Alaska, which is very sad. We saw restaurants shutter in Anchorage right and left because of Ethan Berkowitz's horrible policies. And now the state of Alaska is cutting a 15% pay increase to a certain
for the lawyers.
Yeah, for the lawyers.
Yeah, for the state lawyers. Isn't that great? Because we need more lawyers.
Yeah, I mean, I know that the law department does hard work. I just think it's probably not it's tone deaf. Optics are not great. Optics are not great on that.
You've got private sector people, and almost every business in Alaska has an EIDL loan, which is the loan that they got through the SBA. They're going to be paying that back for the next 30 years. And they're paying it back because of the policies, not because of the virus, but because of the policies. And so the policies destroyed businesses. And sorry about the truck outside there, folks. The policies destroyed businesses. The businesses had to go to the government to get the EIDL loan. Now the government essentially owns the businesses for the next 30 years until those loans are paid off. It is such a racket, John. It's been a criminal enterprise, what's been going on during this COVID disaster. And hopefully we're through it, but I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, I think I have state-owned roads in Nikiski, Island Lake Road, and we know there's potholes in there that hasn't been fixed for 5 years. I drive on this state-owned road and almost crash every time I drive it. I would say let's try to, before we start handing out 15% raises to everybody, let's try to get the bare bones right first. And it is unsafe to drive on some state roads out there. Easy things to fix, easy things, front-facing public stuff that people care about. And let's try to do those correctly first before we start passing out huge raises, unprecedented raises to entire departments. So anyways, we want to thank everybody for joining us for the Must Read Alaska show. And we want to thank our host, Charlie Pierce for Governor, for sponsoring the show. Because of him, we're able to get conservative news all over Alaska. And we want to thank everybody for tuning in. We also want to thank folks who donate to Must Read Alaska. It's because of people like you that we're also able to spread conservative news. If you go to mustreadalaska.com, on the right-hand side there, you can donate to Must Read Alaska, whether it's $1 or $1 million. We appreciate every single dollar that's donated. And you can also find our app. If you have a Android phone or like a Samsung, or if you have an Apple phone, you can go to that app store and just type in Must Read Alaska. We put a lot of time, money, and resources into developing an app for just you. It's free. So while most of our competition makes you pay for everything, and most of our competition has big foundations and stuff to fund their projects, we offer our content for free, and we're funded by the free people of Alaska who donate $5 at a time, $50 at a time, $100 at a time. So we're pretty proud of that. We want to thank you for tuning in. And Suzanne and I will be on the Monday show, so don't forget to not to miss us. Don't forget to watch us Monday morning, 9 o'clock on the Must Read Alaska show. Until then, from somewhere in Alaska, I'm John Quick signing off.